Hi, everyone. It is Tracy Purdy, and we're here for a hangout on air for EdTechTeam Online. Tonight, we are going to be talking about visual literacy. What is visual literacy? And we have an expert on visual literacy with us. I'll introduce Heather in just a minute, but I want to remind you guys that are joining us live that you can use the comment feature in YouTube. So ask questions there, introduce yourself, say hello to people, or you can tweet out any questions that you have. And you can do this when you're watching live, or if you're watching it later, tweet them out and we'll get back to you on answers for those questions. So use the EdTechTeam Online hashtag and share your learning as well. So Heather, thank you so much for joining us. I was wondering if you could start maybe by just doing a quick introduction and tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name's Heather Dowd. And Tracy, I have to laugh when you say I'm an expert in visual literacy because it's not my background in any way, shape, or form. So it's funny that it's become kind of a passion of mine. But I'm a former physics teacher. So I started out teaching high school physics and math. And then I moved into a tech coaching role. And it was in that role that I got really interested in visual literacy, mainly because I realized as a teacher, as a classroom teacher, and then helping teachers that I worked with, we ask kids to create visuals all the time, and we don't give them, we don't tell them, we don't teach them how to communicate visually. And so I know the case in my classroom when I would ask students to make a poster or make a pamphlet, I was usually disappointed in the results. And so I am sure there are many of you that have had a similar experience. And so I kind of went out on a mission to teach myself some graphic design and kind of figure out what was appropriate for, I was in middle school at the time. So that was kind of the level that, I was trying to figure out how do you teach middle school kids about visual literacy and how to communicate a message effectively in a visual way. And so, yeah, that's where a lot of this comes from. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad that you said that too, because I think I'm still learning about visuals and visual literacy and how to share that message in the best way with a visual. So thank you so much for joining us. And I'm going to let you take it away and just help us understand a little bit more about how we can help our students become visually literate.
Thanks. And feel free to stop me at any time with a question or whatever. Don't hesitate to interrupt me. So I'm going to share my screen if that's okay. And let's see. Can you see my screen?
Perfect.
Okay, maybe I'll resize it a little bit. I don't know. What is that? That looks okay?
Yes, that looks
so this is actually, and I'll make sure that you have this short link so you can put it in the notes so people can get to it later. But this is actually my old Google site, so I apologize for that. But it's where I have all my visual literacy and graphic design resources. So I thought I would just maybe show you a couple of my favorite resources that I have links to on here. So everything will be on this site. So I'm going to start so actually down at the bottom. The definition of visual literacy, if we compare it to our definition of literacy, is basically being able to read and write. And I think that is true for visuals as well. It includes both reading visuals and writing or creating visuals. So one of the things I've done more recently actually with students and with teachers is analyzing images. And there's a lot of really great resources out there to do that. So I'm going to show you a couple of my favorites. There's this photo of the day from National Geographic. You're nodding your heads. You've probably seen that one before. I mean, really, first one you come to, like, look at that. That is just, first of all, it's beautiful. It's got beautiful contrast with the colors and the light. But then it's like, what is it, right? And so there's some beautiful photos here to have conversations with your students. So that's one of my favorites. And then this other one is from the New York Times. Have you seen this one? It's called What's Going On in This Picture? And so what they do is they take a photo and they take the caption off. And the idea is to talk about it with your students before you look at what is it actually about. And I'm actually teaching a graduate class right now on new literacies, and we did a week of visual literacy, and one of the teachers started using these, and she does it now every Wednesday, and her kids love it, and it has inspired fantastic conversations. I think she's teaching I want to say she's teaching 4th grade. And so they're having conversations, like really deep conversations about really big issues, starting with just a picture. So there are some really good resources out there that you can use with your students. But along with having the photo, I also think it's important to have good questions. So, you know, I could bring up this photo and just say, what do you see? And you'll probably have a, you know, talk about it for a few minutes and say there's crying babies and there's, you know, a mom of, you know, whatever. But how does a conversation change when you give students something to guide their thinking? So this is an analyzing image procedure that you can use from the website called Facing History. So this is just one, and so you lead through students through this analysis. So there's a step 1. Okay, look at the picture, observe the shapes, look at the colors, write down what you see, what questions do you have? And you know, you can modify this. So this is one of them that I like. And then here's another one. This is by a teacher. He's an art teacher, Frank Kirkovic. So again, all these links are here. This one is the one I've used more often. And if you read through, there are some art questions in here that you can take out based on what the purpose is of looking at the image. But it leads you through a process of having a conversation. And I've done this with students in small groups and like let them talk through. And as the teacher, you kind of have to guide them a little bit to make sure they don't get stuck in this first box, that they kind of progress through. But then at the end of the conversation, I usually come back to, there's a question in box 2 called What's the Story? And then that's sort of my final report out. So the students talk through all the questions, but then their final report out is, okay, what's your story for your small group? And they have to tell me their story. And if you want to make it concise, you can say, you know, what's your story in 2 sentences or something. And what happens is you get a much deeper conversation. So if we look at this picture and we take the time to go through all of those questions, what you get out of the conversation is so much richer and deeper. So those resources are all at the bottom of this site. So these sites help students read visuals. And there's other ones here. Wordless News is really beautiful too. So I don't know the full story. I think she's a graphic designer and she takes news headlines and just, you know, no words, turns them into a graphic. Anyway, they're just beautiful. I'm gonna distract myself with the images.
Love that.
Isn't it great? So that's all down here at the bottom. But that's, I think, just it's a really easy way to bring in a little bit of visual literacy into your classroom. It doesn't take that much time. But then to chat a little bit about creating visuals. So I mentioned that I really got interested in this because I was disappointed with the work that my students created and also things I would see hanging in our school. And I don't think I have that example open, but it all started with a really terribly designed poster advertising a dance that I was embarrassed it was on our school walls. And that's kind of where it started for me. And so like I said, I'm a science teacher. I don't feel that I'm an artist. I don't feel like I'm creative in any way. And I'm learning to change my mind on that. I'm having a growth mindset. So I learned from the art teachers that I've worked with. And so a lot of this that I'm going to share with you comes from art teachers where I, you know, ask them sort of naive questions and kind of figure out what is the essence of what can I take to all of the other classrooms. Obviously in art class, the students are going to go a little bit deeper, but what are the bits and pieces I can pull out and I can implement in science or ELA? So I have these slides on my site. They're kind of just my generic graphic design slides, but anytime I ask students to create something now, if I don't have time to address the graphic design and the visual communication piece, then I don't choose to do something visual. And that's my role for myself. And that's what I encourage the teachers that I work with. So if you don't have time to put the time into it to help kids visually communicate effectively, then maybe perhaps choose something different as a way to assess their knowledge. So that's just my little soapbox, but I'll run you through just kind of a quick little all the different things that I will go through with students. I don't do all of these all at the same time. I usually pick what's appropriate for the project, or maybe build on it, do one of these. So when you are talking about the graphic design elements and principles, the way that this was described to me by the art teacher that I work with is that the elements are the tools that you have available to you when you're designing something, and the principles are the rules that you follow. So what do you do with the tools? And so here are the ones that I kind of drill down and talk about with students. And again, I wouldn't do all of this in one lesson, like font, color, shape, contrast, alignment, repetition, proximity. That would be too much. But I pick what's appropriate. So for students, I always make sure to start with the meaning. So when you are designing something, it has a meaning, and that's what you're communicating. And so every choice that you make should be a conscious choice based on the meaning of what it is that you're creating. And this is, I've worked mostly with middle school, but my colleagues who are tech coaches in the elementary, it's the same conversation in elementary. So I'm just going to skip down, and I'm not going to go through my whole slideshow. This is something that I use when I do an hour workshop, and I know we don't have that much time, so I'm just going to give you kind of the brief version. But when I talk about font, we talk about how font has meaning. So because I'm asking students to really think about the meaning of what they're creating, I want them to choose a font that communicates that meaning. And so I show them, different fonts, and we talk about the fact that they all have, a meaning. And when you see it, it gives you a certain feeling. And then we go into whatever tool they're using to create. So whether that's a Google Slide or a Google Drawing, or it could be on a Mac, it could be Pages or Keynote, and then we experiment and play around with fonts. And so that's kind of one piece of it. And then we move on to color. And again, we talk about how color has meaning. So if you see, red, what does that mean to you? And then we, talk about everybody's different words. Are you still able to see my screen?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So if you see green, what do you think of? So probably something similar to mine, or you might have other words, and that's totally fine too. So we talk about color, and then we get into the color palettes. So graphic designers use color palettes. And if you think about any company that you know of, and you start thinking about their logo and how they communicate out what they are about, you start to realize that they use about 3 to 5 colors. So EdTechTeam, Tracy, you've got the green, the different variations of green and white, like that's an EdTechTeam color scheme. And so we talk about that, and what is the meaning that you want to convey, and what colors kind of represent that. And then, rather than going up here, so here I'll give you an example. Let me go to a slide where I can. So I'm going to go up here to the color palette. So this is normal, right? We see all these colors, and kids and adults alike will choose random colors from this color picker. And most of the time they do not look good together. So there are tools out there for those of us that don't know how to match colors well. So my favorite is Color Lovers.
Mine too.
Is yours too? It's such a good one. So you can just come here to Color Lovers. It has some ads and things, but it's okay. I just go up here to this search, and you can search a feelings, or you can search an adjective. You can search whatever you want. So I'm going to just search happy. And then you scroll, and you get all of these color palettes. And so if you decide you want one, okay, let's say I like this one because I want to have that dark contrast. So then I'm going to scroll down, and it shows me all of the colors. And so this is, this is a little bit detailed, but my students, I've done this with 5th graders, and they're fine with this part of it. The thing that you need is this hex code, and it might be small. Let me see if I can make it a little bit bigger. So this hex code right here, this 6-digit code, is the color. It's the code, I guess, to tell the website what color you want. And so if I copy that and I go back to my slide, and now I can come here to custom. So this is how you would do it in anything Google related. You click custom. I'm going to delete that and paste in my color, and there I've just used that color. So you can repeat that for all 5 of these colors. And then once you do that, they are saved down here in your drawing or your slideshow, and you can now make your entire slideshow fit a color scheme. That alone, if that's the only thing that you do with students when they create a visual, will create a much better product. So that's one of my favorite little tips. It also works in Keynote and Pages. Yeah, there's also color pickers to allow you to get the color. There's different ways that you can do it. But the idea now is that now that you know this, you only get to use these 5 colors in that work, in that product. And so that's the hard part for students, because they still want to come up here and say, well, I just want to add this color in. So that's the really hard part, is kind of limiting them. But limiting sometimes builds creativity. So that's color. And again, we talk about color having meaning. So if you see, oh, here, this is a better one. If you see this, you would expect it to be pink, and it is. By the way, these pages, I took those out of a book, what is it called? It's like one of those National Geographic for kid books, a little square book, and they have facts. Do you know what I'm talking about? You seen those?
I've seen them, yes. I don't know what their official title is.
I can't remember either, but my middle school students love them because they're just really interesting facts, but they're also beautifully designed. So those, I also try to have just really nicely designed stuff around the room when we do projects so that they can get some inspiration. And then shape is the third tool that we talk about. And this is one that I didn't really address this when I first started doing lessons with students, and I realized that they were choosing nice fonts, they were choosing nice color schemes, then they would go off to the internet and find a random photo and put that into their work, and it didn't match anything, and it was like, wait, what's going on? So then I realized, oh wait, they can make their own stuff. So you can make lots of stuff out of simple shapes. So here is a camera. But when you look at it, it's really just circles and rounded rectangles. Here are a couple of other examples that, simple, but you can tell right away what it is. So here are some inspiration from my students. These are my 6th graders. They designed blog headers. So we were using Blogger as a learning portfolio. So they had to brainstorm what they wanted to call it and what they wanted to say and find color schemes. And then we did go to the internet for inspiration for images, but then I said, you don't get to use any of those. And they all groaned. And I said, you have to build it. And in the end, they thanked me. They said, I really was annoyed when you said that, but I love it so much more now,
I love these. That's so true. They're so much more unique and customized to them when you see that they've created these images as well. I love it.
Yeah, they did such a good job. And Olivia with her cats, she worked really hard. Her first round of it, she showed it to me, and I didn't know they were cats. And she just kept working. And in the end, I think they're great. Like it really works. It really works. But also just simple stuff like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Zara's big learning for this was, we did these in, I think this was in a Google drawing. I think hers was in a drawing. And she wanted to have a half circle, but there was no half circle shape. So the big learning was, oh, I can take a white square and go over half the circle. Oh, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because something like Google Drawing and slides, it's not like using Adobe or a really high level professional quality graphic design tool. So sometimes you have to just find the workarounds. But I do have students go to things like the Noun Project for inspiration. We don't download them usually, but we look, if you want to make a tree, type in tree and you get all of these ideas and you can go and make that. So that's one that many of you may have heard of, but if you go to Noun Project, you will see a lot of things that you can recreate yourself. So a lot of really good stuff. And so those are the elements of design. And once we learn those, that also makes the conversations when we analyze images richer, because then students start to use this vocabulary. And same with the principles. So I'll give you my 60-second sort of what are the principles of design. The acronym is CARP. You can rearrange them if you would like and call it crap and make some funny jokes in your class, depending on, the age of your students and if you feel comfortable doing that. And so CARP is really kind of the standard when you do a search for what are the principles of graphic design. These are the words that always come up. And so here they are in my 60-second lecture. Contrast means you create difference in some way to distinguish one thing from another. So you can do this with color. You can do this with font, with size, with where the words are on the page, somehow showing that something is different. Alignment is putting some thought into how things line up. This one is a big one. If you ever have students design a magazine article, our 7th graders would research a feature article, and then we would have them lay it out. And so we would talk about using a grid, which is exactly what people who design magazines do. They start with a grid and everything falls within the grid. And so that's alignment. Repetition means repeating elements of your design. So color, if you're using a color palette, you're doing repetition. Using the same font, in this poster, this is a poster for our one-to-one program, you notice there's the theme of the rounded rectangle boxes. So repeating something, so that's repetition. And then proximity just has to do with location. My slide is not the best example, I should update this, but I always think of an invitation. So if you're writing an invitation or designing an invitation, you would put the date, the time, the location all in the same spot because those things belong together. And if they're around the invitation in different places, you've made it hard to read. So it's not even just about how it looks, it's about how well are you communicating the message? How easy is it for somebody to look at it and read it? And so when you're designing something, you're usually trying to teach somebody something, and you want them to learn that message easily. So that's proximity. And so again, all of these words, once you start using them with students, it will come into play in those conversations that you have. You can now go out and find a graphic and bring it in and have students analyze that graphic using these terms. And I've had really good conversations with like 5th grade and up students, but even younger. My examples are 5th grade and up because those are the ages that I've worked with, but my colleagues have done similar things with younger students. Obviously not every word at once, but they'll focus on one and then they'll have conversations about that. So yeah, that's kind of, I'll just stop there and see if there are any questions or yeah, anything that anybody wants to talk about or go deeper into.
Heather, I love this. I'm sorry at the beginning, you guys, I did not introduce Dominique Dines. She's been in the back channel the whole time. So she is here with us too. And she and I were kind of chatting back and forth in the back channel about how, Heather, we need to come and sit in your session a little bit more as well. I mean, I feel like I continually have things to learn about visual literacy. And so you brought up so many great points of little tiny things that you can do to make your images unique. And I mean, I think back to all of those graphics that my students created that were just, you're disappointed in the results. And it was because I did not teach them these skills because I never was taught them. That was never part of my teacher training at all. So how was I supposed to go about then informing my students that, hey, I've got to have a graphic design background as well to help my students be creators and producers of their work. So I think that everything that you shared is going to be so helpful with everybody who is in the cohort and hopefully other people who are joining from past cohorts to watch as well. So
yeah, feel free to use the slides. They're all here on this site that I'll make sure that you have the link to. And I just take out certain ones depending on the project that I'm doing with students. But I will say, just to your point about like, how am I supposed to know about this? How am I supposed to pass that on? Most of my students create things that are like above and beyond what I feel that I can do. So I guess I'm putting that out there. If you feel a little bit like, this isn't what I can do, it isn't for me either. But what I've learned is with these few little things, it just empowers students to just make some amazing stuff that is just like, they blow me away.
I know, and I love giving them that opportunity and giving them those skills. Because that was not something, I mean, well, I wasn't creating, I was maybe typing something on a computer, but not creating anything like this when I was in school, which is pretty awesome.
Same.
Yeah. No, Heather, this was awesome. As Tracy said, I would love to sit in one of your workshops and learn some more of these design principles myself. We did have one question come in. We have someone asking, if you could purchase one resource about visual literacy, what would it be?
Oh, that's a really good question. I'm going to look through my list of books here. There is a really, only one. Oh my goodness. Well, the Presentation Zen book is really great. Here, I'll bring my screen back up because I have a link to it. That one is, I think, a really great one. Well, it's specifically around designing slides, but I think all the tips, fit pretty much anything. And his website, he's got all kinds of great resources for free on his website. So this is the book here on the side, Presentation Zen. But for kids, I'm trying to remember the name of it. Oh my goodness. Let's see. Goodreads. I have a list of books I like. Which is the one? I'm going to find it. It's such a great, beautifully designed book for kids. This one, Go, A Kid's Design to Graphic Design. And it's by Chip Kidd. And we had a copy of this in our library, and it was just a great resource to have around when doing projects with kids. So if you want like tangible things in your classroom to have, this would be my one that I would have in my classroom.
When throughout the course, they had to listen to one of his TED Talks. So
very cool.
A little extension of that. I have one other question as well. When you're thinking about tools for creation for your students, what's one of your favorite tools for them to use?
Google Slides and Google Drawings. I mean, that's the one that, if you're a Google school and your kids have access to that, that's the easiest one to use. If you happen to have, I was at a one-to-one MacBook school, so Pages and Keynote really are amazing as well. But that one tends to be, there aren't as many schools that have MacBooks, and Google Drawings gets better all the time. I feel like, I don't know, you can do a lot more than the first time I went in there. So yeah, Google Drawings and Google Slides. You can resize, I'm sure some of you know this, but this was like a big aha for me not that long ago. You can resize Google Slides to be any size you want. So you can make it like the size of a book page and then have kids design an ebook, right? And put their own drawings in with words. You can resize it to be poster size and print it poster size. You can make it a square. That was like, that just blew my mind when someone showed me that.
Awesome. Well, good. Well, Heather, I think that we'll have some other questions come in. We really, really appreciate your time. It was very beneficial, and I think that it will be such a great resource for teachers to come back to and review some of those design principles and design tools. So we really appreciate your time, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight as well. Heather, any last thoughts for anybody?
Well, thanks for having me and letting me talk about one of my favorite topics. It's always fun. Now I kind of want to keep playing now that I've got everything open. But thank you.
Yes, of course. So thank you everyone, and we'll see you online soon.